In this episode, I'm joined by Rabbi Yaakov Glasser to discuss our thoughts on the 4 decades of Jewish action. Rabbi Yaakov Glasser is a prominent leader and educator, known for his dynamic teaching and far-reaching impact across the Jewish world. Rabbi Glasser is a managing director of communal engagement at the OU, where he provides vision and leadership to strengthen Jewish communities throughout North America. Before we begin, please take the time to follow and rate this podcast and to follow Jewish Action on social media. That helps us reach more listeners. Thank you. Rabbi Glasser, thank you for joining us again.
It's a pleasure.
So for the people at home, could you tell us a little bit about what you do here at the OU?
Absolutely. It's an absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me again. What do I do at the OU? I am very blessed to have a role at the OU that is incredibly multifaceted. My title is I'm the managing director of community engagement. Community engagement is basically a collection of multiple departments at the OU that are involved in elevating, transforming, inspiring, educating, and advancing our community. We do so through working with different constituencies of the community, and we do so with working with many different contexts of the community. So we work with leaders across the community. We work with institutions, with synagogues, with other organizations across the community. We have direct Torah learning experiences that we deliver to the community. For example, like the Torah apps, All Torah, All Daf, All Mishnah, the Smichas Chaver program, Nachyomi, our women's educational programming, All Mishnah Junior for youth. We work with shul infrastructure. We work with shul leadership, with rabbanim, with executive directors, with gabbayim, with shul presidents, with boards, and also programming in the shuls themselves. We work with innovators in the Jewish community, entrepreneurs who are looking to launch new solutions to the Jewish community for various different issues through our Impact Accelerator, a cohort of really entrepreneurs who are ready to kind of launch their various organizations into the Jewish community. We work with the media, with Jewish Action, with 1840, with OU Press. We work with parts of the OU that relate to various aspects of Jewish life that need attention, like our financial health, like those who are in the constituency of retirees, Torah programming, various lifestyle programming for them as well. It's really an incredible range. Really, I've only kind of touched on it. It's probably 50 to 60 programs that are part of this general area of the OU. And it's exhilarating, it's diverse. Every day is different. Every program is different. And we really have something for everyone. And it's a great schus.
Just to hear you talk about that is exhausting. It's like not only you're dealing with the institutions, you're dealing with professionals, and you're dealing retail directly with the consumer.
Yes.
And
what we call B2B and B2C, business to business. So we deal with institutions that ripples to the community, and we deal directly with the community itself. And Baruch Hashem.
And with the startups, which is the C to the B, the
Correct.
consumers who are then becoming the businesses.
Correct. It's great. It's great. But it's amazing. I grew up in a home totally devoted to Jewish communal work. Both my parents were in Jewish communal work.
I'm sorry.
Are in Jewish
sorry
communal
to
work.
Hear that.
And all their children and all the spouses, like everybody is involved in the Jewish community in some way or another. And so this is exhilarating. This is life. This is anything you could do to help elevate the Jewish community is a great privilege. And the OU is an amazing place to do it. And we're very blessed that we have kashrus, which covers a nice percentage of these efforts.
Not all of it?
Not all of it. Not even most of it. And thank God we have amazing partners all throughout the Jewish world that are helping bridge that gap. And the more partners we could develop, the more we could impact and the more we could do.
It's a very dynamic department.
Baruch Hashem.
The excellent people who you have there. I walk through the floor, talk to people. It's just top-notch, really dedicated people. But let's move on. We're here to talk about Jewish Action.
Jewish Action.
The 40th anniversary issue.
Yes.
Which we had a cover planned, but sadly, as we discussed last time, we had this terrible, tragic loss. But in the magazine itself, this is the winter 2025 issue of Jewish Action. There is a section on the 40th anniversary of Jewish Action.
Right.
Which means 40 years ago, I think it was Joel Schreiber was on the board.
Joel Schreiber, who I worked with at Yeshiva University. He was on the board of REITs, and we worked closely together. I also ran his Simchas Torah program. Joel is an amazing, incredible person. tremendous Ben Torah. He would finish the Yeshiva Masechta every year as a board member
Wow.
and come and make us see him
Nice.
at YU. He's a very, very special person. I'll tell you the biggest shock about a 40-year anniversary, which is that I remember the things that are depicted at the beginning of this timeline.
1985,
Which means
1986.
that I am old enough to be part of a retrospective of 40 years, which itself is quite disturbing. But Baruch Hashem, also a great blessing.
So going back to Joel Schreiber, I think he was the board member who came up with the idea of taking what was just like a newsletter,
Mhm.
turning it into a magazine. We recently lost another leader from the OU, but also from YU as well, Rabbi Julius Berman.
We used to sit right next to each other at the
Oh, wow.
REIT's board meetings
Oh, wow.
with Hy Arbesfeld and the others.
So I used to sit with him at the OU press board meetings.
Ah,
And character, Rav Mordechai Wollig mentioned to me at the Levaya, is one of the few Levayas he's ever been at.
Rabbi Julie Berman's Levaya.
Rabbi Julie Berman's Levaya.
Right.
It's one of the few Levayas he went to where all the stories were actually true. He was larger than life figure.
Yeah.
And at the Levaya, Joel Schreiber was the only non-family member to give a hesped. And he mentioned Jewish Action. That
Very
the
nice.
two of them, way back in the 80s,
Wow.
I think Julie Berman's presidency ended in 1984, I believe, which was around that time they were talking about, let's create Jewish Action. And Joel Schreiber actually went in and did it and was involved for many years in the production of this magazine, starting in 1985 when we were just kids.
And it's amazing, like, for us to imagine in today's world that a magazine was the premier way to convey media and information. Like, there are no phones, there's no email lists, there's no, send it out on WhatsApp. Like, this is it. This is how you're giving over the thoughtful, reflections and ideas related to Jewish life.
And in those it was either a newspaper or magazine.
Yeah.
And there weren't too many from newspapers back in those days.
Right.
It was the Federation newspapers which dominated, but we're getting...
Yeah.
It's ancient history.
Yeah.
Ancient history. So 40 years, and Nechama Carmel, our indefatigable editor, who still has not come on camera, but I'm working on that.
Okay.
She's been at the helm more than half of that time. I'm not going to give any more detail on years. She's not, we don't want to age anybody here. I'm the one with the gray.
She's amazing. She's absolutely amazing. And we're blessed to have you now, not just on the board of Jewish Action, but involved in a professional level.
Oh, so I think listeners are very confused about that. So I'll just briefly state.
Not everyone on the board of the OU works at the OU. We want to make that very clear to all of our listeners. Gil is a special, unique.
I did have a board member who came over and asked me how I got it done, if he could do it also. So I've been very involved in Jewish Action and other parts of the OU for well over a decade. I did work at the OU from 2009 to 2011, and then in the past year, Rabbi Hauer Zetzal brought me on full time. I think we discussed it a little bit last time, but I got feedback that people didn't understand. So I've been very involved in Jewish Action for over a decade. I've been writing in Jewish Action and been very on the editorial board, etc. But now I work here full time on Jewish Action and on other aspects of media. So I think it's your turn. I asked you questions last time, so I think it's your turn to ask me questions.
This is a pleasure. I can't wait to have many questions. I think one thing that jumped out at me as I was looking through the issue, which I hope our listeners will have a chance to look at the issue. I think that'll give greater context to our conversation, obviously.
So JewishAction.com.
JewishAction.com. Yeah. Right. This is a business, the business of Jewish Action. It's fascinating. When we think about issues today, if you were to ask somebody, what's one of the most burning issues of today's Jewish community? So they'll tell you polarization. We're so polarized. We're more polarized today than we can. You open the Jewish Action, and there's a cover there from 1986, right? of the Jewish community, And I'm sure if there was a Jewish Action discovered, like with the Dead Sea Scrolls, in antiquity, I'm sure the cover would be right after the Temple Scroll. I'm sure the cover would be polarization, right? We don't know what group that was, but polarization. So I guess I'm wondering, you look through all these different issues and you look through all the different topics that have been covered over the years in great depth with great thoughtfulness. I'm wondering, like, which of these topics in this retrospective speaks the most to you, has inspired you, is kind of generated a sense of interest in your own writing and in your own research and in the ideas that you've brought forth to the Jewish community.
So one thing you mentioned before was that we remember 1985. And a lot of these issues, I was not reading Jewish Action in 1985, but many of these issues came out as I was maturing intellectually and starting to understand the world, or try to understand the world. And a lot of these affected me deeply. But I just want to raise one recollection of a magazine. I still can't believe it actually happened. We had Rav Aaron Lichtenstein, Rabbi Yoshe Ber Soloveitchik's son-in-law, the Rosh Yeshiva of Gush, a towering intellectual, wrote a book review for Jewish Action of a book by Rav Aaron Feldman,
Wow.
the Rosh Yeshiva of Ner Yisrael, who was his childhood friend. Apparently, they were in the same shir in like 1942, something like that. Just to get Rav Lichtenstein to write a book review is mamash a coup, right? Kudos to Nechama for getting that done. We would kill for something like that. He was towering. I hope everybody who's listening has an understanding of who he was. He was a gadol b'Torah and a very worldly. He had a PhD from Harvard in English literature, top-notch, very, very busy man, running a yeshiva, literally running a yeshiva. He wrote a book review, and it was a negative book review. Jewish magazines do not often write negative book reviews. As a book editor, let me tell you, it's very hard to get a negative review published. You have to go through multiple layers, and at one point, we had lawsuits threatening us over a review that I published. I'm not going to go into that. It's very hard to get
podcast, people.
It's very hard to get a negative review. So what happened next? Part of it is the book is in that book. Rav Aaron Feldman comes out very strong against Zionism. Rav Aaron Feldman, I hope I'm not speaking out of turn. I think when he was in Eretz Yisrael, it became much more of a brisker Nusach Yerushalayim, which is anti-Zionist. And in the book, he has some very harsh things to say about Zionism. And Rav Lichtenstein was Rosh Yeshiva Hesder Yeshiva, a proud religious Zionist. Nusach, his father-in-law, Rav Soloveitchik. So he responded to that, and on women's learning, which was also an issue that Rav Lichtenstein took very seriously. His daughter, of course, is the head of Migdal Oz, which is a school where a seminary. I don't know what they call it exactly in Israel. The terminology is different. Where girls learn, young women learn Gemara at a high level. And so Rav Lichtenstein responded to that, of course, respectfully, the way you expect a Rosh Yeshiva would. Astonishingly, Rav Aaron Feldman wrote a long letter to the editor of Jewish Action in response. Rav Aaron Feldman is a literary writer. He's a phenomenal writer. He's not your average. No Rosh Yeshiva is your average Rosh Yeshiva, but he's not what you'd expect from a Haredi yeshiva.
The King, and
he's a phenomenal, not only Talmud Chacham, thinker, but also writer. The level of expression of English is very, very high quality. So we had a high quality letter back from Rav Aaron Feldman, and then a response by Rav Lichtenstein. It's just, we're talking about polarization. To have that, the exact opposite of polarization, a pleasant disagreement, and they didn't agree. They stated but they also stated where we do agree.
Yeah, but that speaks to the environment that Jewish Action created that made them feel safe, that this was an appropriate place to have a machlokas l'shem shamayim. And the Jewish people have always used machlokas as a way to sharpen our principles and understanding. And we debate. That's what we do. That's, we argue, we debate, and we love each other. And I think part of what we're struggling with as a community now is how to make sure that these debates and arguments remain in the domain of ideas and don't filter into the communal dynamics of how we actually treat each other, feel about each other as Jews. And I think what they must have modeled in that issue is, no, you can really disagree. You can really disagree. You could do it. You could disagree agreeably, and you could do it in a way that it says so much.
One of the things you find in Jewish Action, which is so beautiful, is you find voices from different parts of the community that do not agree.
Right.
And we want people throughout the community to feel heard, and we want the people who don't agree with them to hear them.
Right.
There's value in expressing these different opinions responsibly and respectfully and respectably, so that other people hear and say, you know what, maybe they're not so crazy.
Right.
And we pride ourselves in Jewish Action of doing that. We're not obvious about it. Because when you're obvious about it, it's a little bit of a spectacle. Well, look at this. We got a left wing and a right. We got a right wing. We just let people speak. And we get a lot of letters to the editor, but actually we don't publish probably most of them.
Right.
But people realize that. People realize I'm hearing voices that I don't normally hear in Jewish Action. And I think that's an incredible community service. That alone, I think, is a justification. If Jewish Action had been created just for that,
Right.
Dayenu.
I agree. So let's go back to substantively what this retrospective is kind of surfacing. And I'm wondering, just as a thinker, as a writer, you look at in the issue, there are so many different areas of Jewish life where some of the greatest experts that we have in these different spaces write about kind of like the evolution and the progression of different aspects of Jewish life, whether it's Jewish education or women's Torah learning or Torah learning in general, or all the different areas, mental health. There were many different areas that were covered in the retrospective. I guess what I'm wondering is, you look at the span of development from, let's say, 1986 to where are we now, 2026. I know that, when you talk to younger people in this generation, there's a certain sense that, like, a lot of the excitement of the evolution of the Jewish community kind of happened, during this period of time. And from an institutional standpoint, like, we are where we are. Do you see as much growth happening over the next 40 years as we've seen over the past 40 years in these spaces? Do you see us stagnating on some level? Do you see us with new challenges on the horizon? Take us through what the Jewish Action in 40 years from now is going to look back, hopefully in Hebrew. And, easy Hebrew for all the Americans that came with the Gula, to understand. But, where do you see us in terms of this, looking back, in terms of looking forward?
So the Gemara says that nowadays Nevuah is given to the fools and the children. So I'm not a child. I'm not even gonna. I might be a fool. I'm not gonna show that here. So instead of talking about the future, I just want to point out some things I noticed while looking through the retrospective in the past, and draw the obvious conclusion. But every 4 or 5 years, we have a front page cover story, Torah in the digital age, whatever you want to call it, and many of those I've written, or I've written for. But it's the same topic year after year, but we really believe we've hit a new point, and we have. And over the past 40 years, if you think about it, let's say 1985, the level of computers in those days, I remember what computers were in those days. It was nothing compared to what it is now. It was like, a few hundred K was a big thing to talk about, and now we're talking terabytes. And people had like the Commodore or
Commodore
whatever.
64.
Every 5 years, probably there was a digital revolution, and it was worthwhile talking about it. And the next, honestly, I'll let people know, the next cover story is going to be about AI. Another Torah in the digital age story that we keep, and it is a big deal. But what we've seen over the past 40 years is that every few years, we take a step back and say, wow, things have changed so much, but we're still talking about the theme. The theme is the same. And what you said also about polarization, going back, to the Dead Sea Scroll time. It's Chazal talk about it. The reason why was there a Churban? So, of course, there are different Chazals about it, but one about it is because we're kitos. We're all in different sects, different segments, and who didn't agree with each other, and that caused the Churban, and we're still living in an unredeemed world, and we still have that same problem of kitos. And it comes up in Jewish Action every 4 or 5 years also, is that what do we do about it? How do we, and every time there are solutions. People shouldn't give up hope and think there's nothing we could do about it. There are solutions to today's problems, but there are going to be new problems that keep popping up. It's, we do the whack-a-mole, but it's lo lecha hamlacha ligmor, but we still have to do something. And so it's valuable to talk. The more we talk about it, the more these entrepreneurs come up with solutions, and the more people hear about it. We're still not at the point, not yet, where 100% of the Jewish community read Jewish Action. We'll get there eventually, hopefully. So even if we had the perfect solution to polarization in a magazine, we still wouldn't solve the communal problem completely.
Right.
But we don't have to solve the problems completely. We have to elevate the people we're reaching and help them become better Jews. So we're doing a lot of that, even though we're repeating. So I'm not going to project what's going to be in the future, but I've noticed in the past there are recurring issues that come up again and again. And another thing I noticed is natural disasters are also cover stories. I shouldn't say natural disasters, whether it's 9/11, the disengagement, the global financial crisis, Hurricane Sandy. Remember that? I don't think it was a cover story, but the flooding in Houston was devastating, and the OU itself sent people down there.
Shul, yeah.
Sent people down there, and we wrote about that in Jewish Action as well. COVID, October 7th. Lo Aleinu, there's every few years there's something terrible to write about and to think about it from the Torah perspective. And Jewish Action is there to do that with people.
And to bring forward all the stories of resilience and the way in which the Jewish community contended with these crises and challenges. That it's not just a newspaper article documenting here's the terrible things that happened. Often Jewish Action is able to kind of unpack how did it impact our community? How did we deal with it? How do we relate to it? I'm curious, because you mentioned like every few years, sometimes the same. When you look at this span, do you feel like change in general is accelerating at a pace? In other words, do you feel like the community between 1986 and 1996 in the various areas that are covered, I think you wrote about technology. So the various areas that are covered, do you feel like we're at a point now where like these cover stories, they can't be every 5 years. They actually have to be every 8 months. Like, things are changing. Not just things are changing, but things are changing faster. Do you feel that when you look through the?
So the answer I'm supposed to give you is yes.
I'm setting you up.
But I don't feel that. There's the rate of change is supposed to be faster now than it was 100 years ago.
Right.
I don't know if it's faster now than it was in the 90s. Things happened and some things happened slowly. Look, women's Torah education changed slowly. It was a long process, and the process is not done yet. And there's amazing things happening at the OU about this in the community engagement department. But I don't think those things happen overnight. People have to build institutions, and we're not only reporting on what people are doing, we're also helping people think about it, helping people process disaster, change. How are our thought leaders of the community thinking about it and processing it? And Baruch Hashem, we have writers here who are just so top notch, going back 40 years ago. I mean, if you look at the people who were writing then and throughout the 40 years, it's just amazing. With Rabbi Hillel Goldberg, Dr. Judith Bleich, Rabbi Yitzhak Breitowitz, Rabbi Yitzhak Adlerstein, and I'm picking out only a few, but over 40 years, how many issues? That's 160 issues. We've had, Baruch Hashem, so many writers. I mean, one.
You gave them a platform. These were treasures. I grew up in Los Angeles. Rabbi Adlerstein was my 10th and 11th grade Rebbe.
Wow, I did not know.
And yeah, absolutely. And I used to listen to him on the radio on Religion on the Line with Dennis Prager. I think it was Sunday nights or something like that. It was fascinating, but he was in Los Angeles, and this kind of gave a platform. Today, if you live in Los Angeles through technology, you're all over the world in 30 seconds. In 1986 or in 1992, that was not the same reality. So this is a chance to scale, so to speak, ideas. And it's not just, it's not just a journal. It's something that also, and that's the other thing that I think is important to keep in mind, is that Jewish Action was not just for academics, even though it was appreciated by academics. It wasn't just for rabbis and educators, even though it was written at a high enough level and substantive enough and reflective enough that it was appreciated by those populations. But it was also entirely accessible to the Hamonam, to anyone who just wanted to become better informed and understand deeper, like what was going on. So that I think it has done a phenomenal job of. I'm wondering, when you look through the 40-year retrospective and you think about where we are, so do you feel like there's not just kind of like a development and a momentum and kind of a decades chronicle of the evolution of the Jewish community, but there are different eras? Like, do you feel like there are fundamental inflection points of change in the narrative of our community that you can see through these lifetimes have transversed into different eras? Do you feel we're on the precipice of a different era? I'm just wondering.
So I'll give you a little insight into the Jewish Action Editorial Board. I don't think you were on the board at the time during COVID.
No.
There was a lot of discussion about how COVID is the start of a new era.
Right.
And I kept saying, no, it's not. Nothing's changing. Point.
Yes, I remember. I was a shul rabbi. I was basically a school nurse for a year and a half, taking people's temperature and telling them, when they can leave their house based on a shach in Yeridea.
So for that period of time, everything had changed.
Yeah.
And I kept telling the board, yeah, this is temporary. Nothing's going to change. But we decided, I was pressured, I think by Rabbi Hauer actually, to write an article about how Torah has changed. It's like the new era of halacha to COVID. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. So I wrote an article about how nothing is changing due to COVID in halacha. And but it wasn't exciting enough. So I had to put in like a little extra juice in there. That around that time was when we lost the last of the pre-Holocaust Talmidei Chachamim. Yeah. And we might finally be hitting the inflection point of post-Holocaust when we no longer we still Baruch Hashem, there are a few nonagenarians there, but they were really trained after the Holocaust. It was really when Rav Elyashiv passed away that we no longer had a major posek who was trained before the Holocaust. So I was saying COVID might be the first major crisis in which post-Holocaust poskim were setting the agenda. Even that was controversial. I got a lot of pushback. We had to send it to Rosh Hashiva for approval before we published it.
Oh.
But
did Rabbi Feldman write a letter against the article? It wasn't that.
We could talk after the recording is over. So things don't change that quickly. Now, sociologically, the whole world has changed in the past 40 years dramatically, and the internet has changed things dramatically as well. But in our little communities where we all live near a shul and we all still have the same shiurim, how much has really changed? We still send our kids to the same yeshivas. We've been fetching about tuition for 40 years. How much of that has changed? There's been, Baruch Hashem, a lot of activity on that, both in the OU and in the schools, in the local level. A lot of people are still fetching about the same things 40 years later. So have we reached an inflection point? I don't know. Maybe it takes a generation or two. And I used to hear about the millennials, how the millennials are the worst thing. They're the terrible generation, which, by the way, they were saying about Gen X when I was a kid as well. But look, the millennials are out there in the workforce and the parents, or they're raising kids. Are they that different? I don't buy, and I'm a skeptic on all these massive changes. Nefesh B'Nefesh was transformative of the Aliyah experience. Have many more people made Aliyah since then? It's easier. I don't know if the numbers have changed that much. I hope I'm wrong. I just see a lot of people in the five towns. And in Brooklyn, not so much in Brooklyn, but in Teaneck and in Lakewood.
The population has grown everywhere, so it depends what you're measuring. If you're measuring percentages, if you're measuring numbers of people, if you're...
I appreciate your attempt to put lipstick on a pig. A lot of things have... Israel is completely different than it was when I visited in 1980. Totally different country. I remember there was like one phone. Someone in the Moshav had a phone. That was it. And now, it's this smartphone generation. Right. So the technology has changed a lot as well. More access to Torah, more access to... When I'm okay, I have some gray in my face. I can say this. I used to work a block away from the New York Public Library in Midtown. And I would go there during lunch a lot because they had this Dorot section with incredible Sfarim. And I had access to this massive Torah library during lunch at work. I haven't been there...
As we all do during lunch.
I haven't been there because now I have HebrewBooks.org.
Right.
Now I have access to all of it on my phone that I used to have to go to the library and check it out. And there was a whole big process. I don't need to go there anymore. Who needs that? And with the Sefaria and the Torah app and all the Aldaf, and we're about to release the Orbit app, which has transcriptions of 150,000 shurim. I mean, this incredible stuff is out there. So that a lot has been transformational. People are learning more Torah, thanks to Daf Yomi, thanks to Aldaf, thanks to all of that. But is a community unrecognizable from what it was 40 years ago? I'm not so sure. I remember what things were like in the 80s. I grew up in Teaneck when it was a small town. How much has really changed? By the way, I realize now this is the exact opposite of what anything Rabbi David Bashefin would say in 1840. He would say everything's changed. Call me a skeptic.
But it's interesting. I think you're kind of framing the development of the community in terms of, look, we have core values. We have a core lifestyle that we're trying to live through those values or with those values. And at the end of the day, all of this change and all of this evolution may impact where you're learning during lunch, if it's on your phone or in the library, but not that you're learning during lunch. In other words, that's the core value. So, I also grew up, in the 80s, and you think about your life, it was probably a little simpler and a little less scattered. It didn't feel that way then, but at the end of the day, your priorities were your priorities, same priorities you're trying to live by today, just with different realities that surround those. And I think that's one of the great aspects of Frumkeit and living a life that is so anchored in a certain rhythm that modernity and technology, which is really what we're talking about, as it's introduced into our context and our landscape, it's digested into, okay, in what way will this affect or impact our core life? But that life is ultimately about Torah and mitzvos. That's really what we're trying to do. It's what we were trying to do in the 80s, and then again in the 90s, and then and it's what we're trying to do today.
Exactly. Now we can look at details. Look, I learned Ivrit Bivrit. My kids did not.
Right.
The year in Israel was transformational.
Right.
And in my day, not everybody went to that year in Israel, and now they do, and that has changed. A lot of things have changed. I don't want to say that, let's say, our generation or the generation before us accomplished nothing. Baruch Hashem, people accomplished a lot. But Big Adol, looking at the big picture, still living, still Torah mitzvahs.
So let me ask you another question. As a writer, as a thinker, as a contributor to Jewish Action, when was your earliest article? Do you remember?
I think it was 2007, a review of the Machzor Mesoras Harav.
Okay, good. So 2007 to 2026, that's already
19 years.
Right, that's already half of our retrospective that we have sitting with us. So I guess my question is, given the evolution of the community and its knowledge base and its, just all the different aspects of it, do you approach topics and issues differently when you write about them today than when you wrote about them at the outset of your career? Are you writing for a different Jewish people? Do you feel like people digest do you feel like people digest ideas and interact with publications differently today than they did before? Is that affecting how you're thinking and how you're formulating and writing? Would we ever see a Rav Lichtenstein, Rav Feldman interaction today? Is that something that you're thinking about?
So actually, I wrote an article about this in Jewish Action about exactly that. There was the evolution of the Sefer. As technology developed, my thesis was people have shorter attention spans, so we need to write articles that are shorter, punchier, and have a little drama in it to get people to read, because people aren't reading long form anymore.
Right.
I don't know if that's true.
The TikTokization of Jewish Action.
Yeah, that's what I did. And my article, actually, I say at the end, this is an example of me using all those tricks that I just described. Now go back and read it again, and you'll see it.
Right.
I thought it was very clever. I got a lot of hana out of that. I don't know if anybody cared or noticed, but we're writing shorter. We have section headers because people don't have that much attention span. But people read this on Shabbos. So, isn't it amazing how the minute Shabbos begins, you're a shul rabbi, so it might not apply to you. The rest of us, everything changes. We're suddenly calmer.
Shivas Yomim Tavos.
You have time to flip through a magazine, to read the articles in depth, which you don't have during the week. I find I have a pile of books that I ignore the whole week come Shabbos. That's when I'm reading. I'm plowing through those books. So have things changed? So I'll give you a little more insight into the editorial board meetings that I've experienced over the past, I don't know how many years I've been part of it. There's one of the things about Jewish Action, which we have been accused of in the editorial board, is you guys are too serious. which you look at a magazine, and we have human interest in there. We have recipes in Jewish Action. Do you know how much flack I get from, let's say, some of the other magazine editors that I know? They're like, recipes? I thought this is a serious magazine. It is. It's for the family.
Tradition could use some recipes. I think it would expand
The RJJ Journal has some recipes at the
right at the bottom.
There's variety within the magazine, but if you look at the covers, we're too heavy sometimes, and this especially started with the introduction of. I should give a shout out to Rabbi Moshe Bain and Rabbi Moshe Howard Zatzal, Yibad Chaim ben Chaim L'Chaim. When each of them joined the board, we got more serious because they are all about applying Jewish values to life. And every opportunity, they wanted to talk about some other Jewish value and how we can apply it to life.
They had a journal themselves, I think.
They had Cloud Perspective, which was very serious. And every once in a while, you'd hear a board member going, one of the older board members saying, Jewish Action didn't used to be so serious. We used to have, so we try to, not only do we have variety in a magazine, we try to have a variety from magazine to magazine. You can't have 4 cover stories in a row that are thought pieces.
Right.
It's too much. But then as I look through the archives, and here we have archives here on our floor here in the OU, it was always serious. Look back in 1985, 1986. It was always serious magazine. We were always doing serious thought pieces. In those days, we had symposia about really important issues. I remember I was changed personally by the symposium in 1999 on religious Zionism. I had not figured out my hashkafa on that. And I read Rav Moshe Lichtenstein's article on that one, and I said, you know what? That's me.
Right.
That's where I fall on. And now, of course, we're how many years later? 27 years later? I don't know if I would say the same thing nowadays that I would then. But we've had a lot of serious, really impactful thought pieces throughout, and we continue doing that. And we criticize ourselves, we're too serious. People like serious. People want serious.
So there's no truth that the Kichels are coming to Jewish Action. That's just a rumor. There's absolutely no.
We can't outbid.
There's no recipes. Yes, comics. We draw the line. We're not sports.
Are you volunteering? The Yeshiva League. We should have an update on the Yeshiva League.
Baruch Hashem, it's a place that people turn to for prominent ideas. It's interesting. Even that whole back and forth is interesting about to what extent do people turn to that Shabbos morning coffee Jewish Action moment as a escape from the kind of heavy seriousness of life, and to what extent do they turn to it as kind of like a new modality to engage it in a thoughtful way and I imagine different people look for different things, and that's part of the challenge of creating a publication that, as we said before, appeals to everybody. And I think that it's done a remarkable job over the years. And you could see the imprint of all these different voices and these different personalities. And it's amazing.
I want people in shul to be talking about Jewish Action. It comes out once a quarter, so it's not going to be every Shabbos. So
right.
Just one Shabbos every few months.
Right.
Bear with me. Your shul will have people talking about Jewish Action. So, for example, we want when
with pleasure, not during shul, but
Ben Gavra between the Aliyahs, Nod, wink, wink.
Until my sermon. After my sermon, I don't want to talk about Jewish Action.
There was a number of years ago, there were a few rabbinic scandals in a row, and we had Rabbi Yitzhak Breitowitz
I remember this.
Write this article about when rabbis fail.
Yeah.
And I think that helped the whole community process it. And not only that, I later discovered it, apparently had given permission, we just forgot about it. It had been translated into Hebrew and published in a book for Israeli rabbis.
Wow.
There's a book being Srara Avdus Shehi Srara.
Okay.
Right? There's a Gemara about serving the community is really Avdus.
Right.
Srara Shehi Avdus.
Right.
Rabbi Moshe Lowenthal works out of this think tank in Hebron.
Right.
For run by, I think, Rav Dov Lior. He founded it for rabbis. He translated it and put it in the second volume of his book.
Right.
Which is astounding to me, the reach that we have and how important that article was. And we have a few other articles that are really important.
You bring up an important point, which is sometimes it's not just the substance of the article. It's the willingness to deal with the issue that itself is a mark of incredible leadership. And and gives the community a space to have the conversation where at least it's surrounded by thoughtfulness, responsible rhetoric, ideas, as opposed to what was happening around that time, which is it was just the Shabbos table, hock of, what's going on, and it becomes a Lashon Hara fest and all these other things. It gives us a chance to, and sometimes that requires a lot of courage. It's we describe as controversial, but sometimes it requires a lot of courage. The OU has so many different constituencies. Its strength is its diversity and its breadth.
Right.
And that also, I'm sure, makes sometimes how you approach an issue or how you approach a particular topic to be a great challenge.
I'll say one thing, Jewish Action has been very consistent over time, consistent quality. One thing that I think people rightfully criticize is that we're too New York centric. I also think we're too focused on the mainstream, like the standard person in the community, and we're trying to get away from that and also focus on people in different parts of the community. But one thing that I think we're very good at doing that I'll say something controversial. I can't have a podcast without saying something controversial. I don't believe in the concept of meaningful people. I think if you peel back layers, almost everyone in our community is meaningful. We just need to talk to them and think about their experiences in their lives. And Jewish Action is really good at that, about talking about the different people in the different communities and the different types of people in different communities. It's not just the superstars who juggle 5 jobs and manage to, have 1 million social media followers who are meaningful people. Just the average guy who goes to shul, 2 or 3 times a day, 7 days a week. He's meaningful. And the guy who doesn't, but wants to, or is thinking about it, or for whatever historical, personal reasons, there's so many people who are meaningful, and we talk about those people, and we talk to those people in Jewish Action.
I have to tell you, one of the great gifts of Rabbanus is this realization. You sit with people in your kehillah that no one knows, will never be the subject of an article in Jewish Action or any podcast. And you encounter such magnitudes of faith and perseverance and sometimes creativity, and you walk away. You think they think you're giving chizuk, but you walk away. I was just with a couple last night who are raising 2 children that have such complexity. You couldn't produce enough volumes to get into their issues, and they're heroic. They're amazing. They put one foot in front of the other. And I look at these people, and exactly, they're never going to be on the cover of a magazine. But Klal Yisrael is full of heroes. And I think that's kind of the godless of this, which is often people can see themselves, in a lot of these stories. It's interesting that you mentioned New York focus. I grew up out of town, and my wife grew up out of town. We both grew up in Los Angeles, which is no longer thought of as out of town with its million restaurants. But when we grew up, one high school, couple pizza shops, it was a very different experience. And when you would see New York publications, so the only time out of town was mentioned is another class. You know what I mean? We're going to do an article about out of town. We would never consider quoting the Rav from Los Angeles in terms of the opinion on the burning issues of the day. For that, we'll turn to the, Rabbanim in New York. But when we write about out of town, then we'll quote out of town. And that's, obviously our worlds have bridged on many different levels and become closer together. But I think that's an interesting aspiration, even moving forward, to just think about the Jewish community and its sense of wholeness and its reach and where we all are. And even as populations move around, which has been happening. And it's something that we can speak to.
So I really appreciate you coming onto the podcast again and having this conversation about Jewish Action's 40th anniversary. Mir Hashem will be back to speak about the 80th anniversary in 40 years. And in the meantime, everybody should read Jewish Action on jewishaction.com, follow us on social media, and subscribe to this podcast. So thank you very much.
And write us letters so we could have entertaining meetings with the
editorial board.
Board. Yeah, keep them coming. Absolutely.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you.